I'm Gary Stevenson, former trader and people's economist. Welcome back to Gary's Economics. Today we are going to talk about recessions. Okay, so there was a big report out by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, in the last couple of weeks, saying that the UK is going to avoid a recession. And this was reported in a lot of the media, the BBC, basically all the major news outlets. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what a recession is, and really more than anything, why this way of understanding the economy is not very helpful and perhaps even somewhat damaging. So a recession is very narrowly defined. It's a technical economic phenomenon, which means 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. For this reason, I think it's a little bit stupid to focus on things like narrowly missing a recession, right? The first reason is you could have 1 quarter of negative growth and 1 quarter of very slightly positive growth, and officially that means you've missed a recession. It's really the difference between having minus 0.1% growth and plus 0.1% growth. Really, in one case you've had a recession, in one case you've missed a recession, and the difference to your life is basically completely invisible. So this focus on whether we technically get a recession or not is pretty ridiculous. The second thing is that really, whether we have a recession or not, it's totally possible that your life is getting worse whilst we are technically not in a recession. I think the best example of that is in the 2008 crisis. The recession officially ended in the middle of 2009, and yet the 10, 15 years since 2009 have seen some of the biggest and fastest falls in living standards for ordinary people in the history of the country in peacetime. In the 10 years after 2010, especially after the election of the Conservative coalition austerity government, we saw massive falls in living standards. Technically, that was not a period of recession. And what this connects to is something we've mentioned in previous videos, right? Which is recession is only a measure of what is happening to GDP, which is the overall size of the economy. So if you have an economy which is growing slowly, but becoming much more unequal, you could easily have what we have had, which is living standards rising for the richest, whilst they fall for most ordinary people. So I think this focus on a recession is somewhat absurd. I think it reveals the ridiculous sort of technocratic approach that a lot of economists in the media have. Because really, whether we have a recession or not, it doesn't make any difference. Technically, we've not been in a recession the last couple of years. And yet what has happened to ordinary living standards? But they've absolutely collapsed. So you should be focused on living standards for yourself, for your family, your community, and you shouldn't really worry about whether we're technically in a recession or not. But I think what is more damaging than the basic irrelevance of whether we're in a recession is the fact that the framing of this economic crisis as a recession could quite possibly lead to significant further economic deterioration. And the reason I say that is that when you frame this economic crisis, this cost of living crisis, as a recession, people understand that to mean a kind of temporary fall in living conditions. People think that recessions are things that you go through, they last a period of time, you come out of them, and then things get better. That is not what is going to happen in this crisis, right? Things have gotten significantly worse really, really quickly. That rate of extremely rapid decline, I think, will slow down, but things will continue to get worse over the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years. And that is because we have a fundamental problem in the core of our economy of rapidly increasing wealth inequality, which is not being fixed. So this is not a crisis which is bad and then gets better. This is a crisis which is bad and then gets worse. And I know that for sure because you can see that the massively growing problem of the wealth distribution, which has gotten massively worse in the last 3-4 years, is not getting fixed, will not be fixed, and will continue to get worse. So by calling this economic crisis a recession, it's as if you've got cancer and the media is calling it a cold. They're saying, look, you've got a temporary problem take some rest, drink some water, things will get better. But that is not what is needed here. Because if they say that, and if you believe that, then the fundamental underlying crisis of growing wealth inequality, of falling living standards, of the death of the middle class, all the things that we've been talking about on this channel will not get resolved. And furthermore, it means that there will be no impetus to talk about or fix the massive amount of wealth, the £700 billion that has gone from the government to the richest people in the country in the last couple of years. So whenever you hear the media talking about we're in a recession, or we missed a recession, or we're out of recession, ignore it and ask them, what are you doing about wealth inequality? What are you doing about the massive increase in wealth inequality in the last 3 years, the fastest ever increase in wealth of the richest people in the country, the £700 billion that has gone from the government to the richest? When you're fixing these things. Don't listen to the media talking about recession. Focus on inequality, because that is what's going to matter. If we don't fix it, things will get worse. If we do fix it, things will get better. So ignore the recessions, follow the money, and demand that your politicians fix wealth inequality and that your media start talking about it more. And the economists as well. Don't let them off, because they're useless. Thank you. Support the channel. Help us reduce wealth inequality. Help us prevent this economic disaster. If we don't do anything, things will get worse. So we have to do stuff to make it better. Thank you.